Today's determined attackers easily bypass even the most advanced network defenses. Trying to ramp up staff to detect their backdoors can cost thousands of dollars and take months, even years. With Active Countermeasures AI Hunter, we enable junior analysts to detect even the most advanced backdoors in a matter of hours. Sign up for a demo and purchase our product today by visiting activecountermeasures.com/PSW. Active Countermeasures. Make every analyst a hunter. Endgame automates the hunt for both known and never-before-seen adversaries in enterprise networks. Built on unique knowledge on the adversary's tools, techniques, and tactics, Endgame's centrally managed agent prevents, detects, and responds to advanced adversaries in the earliest stages of the kill chain without prior knowledge. Endgame. Automate the hunt. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. This is the security news for this week. I want to start by talking about malicious Docker containers. There were 17 containers deemed as malicious that reportedly have been downloaded over 5 million times and ended up mining, as a result of this, $90,000 in Bitcoin. No, it wasn't Bitcoin. Sorry. It was Monero, I think. Something like that. Anyway, some kind of cryptocurrency. Ethereum, maybe?
What containers were they, Paul?
That's a really good question. I don't think the article really stated exactly which ones they were.
Because this is totally new to me. I didn't actually read the article, so my bad. Let me actually take a look at this real quick.
It was Fortinet that found the containers and published a report. Yeah, it was Monero.
Monero,
yeah. Thank you.
17 malicious containers.
Each of the images advertise themselves as tools for popular software such as Apache Tomcat, MySQL, and cron, with a capital C.
Why would you do a cron container?
Is that like cron? Well, it's a capital C. I'm assuming is that cron, like, not cron job, but I guess.
I wouldn't put it past anybody.
I mean, you should have services separate. I'm not sure that necessarily qualifies as. I think cron needs to anyway. Yeah. So that was
anyway.
So Paul, was this were they found in like Docker Hub or something like that?
Yes, they were in Docker Hub.
Okay, so what this would have been then is it would have been a repository that was uploaded as an additional repository by someone like myself or a private user.
Correct.
That has made that public, right? So effectively what happened here is it wasn't the base MySQL container that was actually vulnerable.
It was someone else's MySQL container. I see hands. I see hands on the door behind me, which is really funny. And the door's moving.
Well, you've got ghosts, Paul. Congratulations.
Somebody wanted to get to the bar, apparently.
I mean, that stuff's important. Anyway. So, yeah, this was, people uploaded rogue containers. If you give it a popular name, people could download it and run it and then be mining your cryptocurrency. I mean, this is a scenario we've talked about in the past. I don't think the shocking thing is, why didn't Docker Hub pick up on this? I thought they had scripts that looked for this type of stuff, right?
Yes, and so that's the other thing that my understanding was the same as yours, Paul, which is any container that makes it to the public Docker Hub repository should in fact be getting scanned by some sort of, I don't know if it's a DAST or a SAST solution.
Something. I don't know what they're scan. Well, obviously it's something that has limitations to what it can scan for, and someone figured that out.
So as is often the case, the root cause here needs to be investigated. The problem was not that there's these malicious Docker containers.
Correct.
The question is, how did they get there in the first
place?
How were they allowed to be put up there? Perhaps there will be further reporting.
Or
not. Right. Maybe this is dead and we can all go home. My speculation here is that it probably is the problem of like a walled garden, right? Like, so they don't have a good way of actually confirming exactly what's wrong with the containers when they get pulled up. So it could have been kind of like an a secondary payload, right? So you run the container, it recognizes that it's actually being tested or assessed in some way, so it doesn't present the behavior that is malicious,
That's
which
a
is
great
mining
theory,
Monero.
actually. Yeah.
Maybe it waits 10 minutes, it waits 15 minutes, it waits an hour, right? Whatever. And then it actually starts doing the mining thereafter, which I would be interested in, and I'm sure there are a number of people that do analysis that would be interested in actually going and downloading those containers and figuring out how they operate, because that's probably going to be the next major attack vector, folks. I mean, it's going to be containers at some point. It already happened to you, Paul.
Attackers are certainly very well aware and using the containerized infrastructure to do evil things. And, if I had to speculate, if I were to create a container, I may put a binary in there that's named like any other binary inside the container, except when that binary runs, it's mining cryptocurrency. The type of scanning you would need would be to like validate that binary in some way, or do some kind of sandboxing approach. Like, there's lots of approaches to do that, all of which have a cost on the other side as to how much scrutiny you're going to put when you put apps in. But it's absolutely the same problem that Apple and Google and Microsoft and others have, where Chrome, right, where they're trying to vet these add-ons.
Yeah. So it'll be an ongoing problem, to say the least. This is not the last we've seen of this.
Certainly.
So this idea of putting a Docker container up that's been improved or modified or customized, is that, would you say, an immature stage, that there needs to be something additional added for vetting these things? Or is it a bad idea to do that at all?
So honestly, it's actually fairly common practice, right? So maybe you've got like the base.
That doesn't mean it's a good idea.
Right. Well, and so that's just the thing, right? Is it's figuring out the trust aspect associated with it. So open source software is another great example of this, right? Just because someone wrote an application and they posted it publicly and someone forked it and made edits, which do you trust? Mm-hmm. The main one or the fork? And if you're trusting the fork, what sort of validation are you doing against the fork to make sure that it's not malicious? So to a large degree, anything that makes it out onto Docker Hub, as I understand it, and we'd love to get, if any of our listeners are from Docker and can get on the show to comment on this, or can at least write us psw@securityweekly.com, I'd be curious how it even made it past the Docker Hub checks, right? Because
Docker Hub has some kind of scanner. Did they build their own scanner or buy someone or use an open source one? They had some kind of, I forget the history, but they definitely had, I mean, this is container scanning is the issue, because they're not being run, so they're just scanning whatever is potentially going to be hosted in Docker Hub, which is that's a pretty big task, because there's lots of container repositories out there. So yeah. Interesting. Yeah. The First Lady has, according to Robert Graham, some bad advice, and takes it on point by point. This document was created, I believe, with the help of the FTC to provide cybersecurity advice to the masses. And Robert goes through strong passwords, the HTTP versus HTTPS backups, and kind of picks apart the recommendations. It basically says we can do better, as a security community, as whoever's going to be making recommendations, we have to provide recommendations that are both easily understandable, but also effective as well, and up to date with the times today.
Yeah, I think the big thing is up to date, and I doubt if anybody that was terribly security savvy read these things and wrote these things in the first place. Obviously, right. The First Lady didn't do it. Well, maybe she did. I don't know. But so it's more of a function of I mean, even the idea of passwords. Do the people know that NIST has come out and tried to throw away the idea of reusable passwords, or password changing every 90 days and length and stuff like that. I read most of his article. I don't know if he ever got down to mentioning the fact that so many websites these days use multi-factor authentication, and where does that come into play. So, I think the bottom line for this article, and Radabab was uh, nicer than he usually is. I think
He was.
But the bottom line is, this should have been vetted by somebody that, whose job it is as a professional, maybe outside the government. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because the person that had that role in the government got fired, but,
Exactly. Right. So the interesting thing is, though, I don't entirely disagree with the screenshot that Rob has put forward, which is use different passwords for different accounts, and that way, if a hacker gets into one, he can't get into the others. Yeah, I mean, we all use password, vaults or what have you anyway, and we're all using strong, randomly generated passwords that are all unique. So I don't see anything wrong with that advice, quite frankly. I mean, maybe there's stuff in the preamble to that specific highlight that he has in the screenshot that seems to be wrong, but to me, that actually seems pretty good.
Well, I think today it's just difficult to provide advice on passwords, just because, well, so many people have opinions, so many sites have a different risk level, and there's things like two-factor authentication and password vaults that have to fly into it, which you also have to take into account the audience that's consuming that. So I think the advice is different for really every user. So to have this document be its goal, be large sweeping recommendations that are going to hit the majority of people in the world, it's ambitious at best, right? I don't think any.
Well, and it wasn't too the purpose of this coming from the First Lady. It had something to do with young people as they're coming of age,
sure,
and getting on the internet, which happens frankly before they know how to read. At this point.
True,
but so either that's as an audience, as a base of type of user, that's either a very high level beginner type of, they don't have a lot of complexity in terms of where they're going, and so a lot of this advice is probably way over their head anyway. On the other hand, it's the type of users that, and I think the intent was, let's start them young, train them right, start early, and who's more vulnerable than young people, minors on the internet, and so it's a very important class of users to try to protect. So a for ambition or intention. They fall down in the execution.
I want to talk about the smart lock that can be hacked in seconds. Now, when I first, there was a fingerprint one that was pretty bad. I think I've seen an advertisement for this particular lock that it allows, I think you unlock the lock with your smartphone, has some kind of pairing to your smartphone. The major flaw in its design, and I quote, is the unlock key for the device is easily discovered because it's generated from the Bluetooth Low Energy ID that is broadcast by the lock. Anyone with a smartphone would be able to pick up this key if they scan for Bluetooth devices when close to the brand is called Tap Lock. Using this key that's broadcast in the air in conjunction with commands broadcast by the Tap Lock would let attackers successfully open anyone they found, said the researcher.
So, Keith, is this broken authentication or broken cryptography?
Authentication, in this case. This is a replay attack.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Broken implementation.
Yep. But who would ever do that?
Right?
Clearly, these developers.
Can you touch on,
in this case?
I don't know what else you want to say about that other than
just I thought it was interesting because I saw those locks advertised and I'm like, someone's going to hack that, and then usually when I say that, a certain amount of time goes by and then I cover the article on the show and I'm like, oh look, someone hacked that.
Right. Hey,
well, wasn't this
I don't know if, go ahead, Keith.
I was going to say, didn't someone also show that you can basically like pop off the front of it?
Yes.
And,
there was
like
a physical attack as well.
Yeah, and then it's like you've got access to all the internals. Like there's nothing stopping you at that point.
Right. I mean, that requires more time and arguably a little more effort, right? And you have to physically be messing with the lock. This attack is a little more concerning when we think about the use case for this lock, that basically I can just use an app on my phone or some kind of technology wirelessly to derive the key and pop the lock open. That's a little more concerning for me.
Yeah. So to that end, in my mind, it's like, okay, look, if the physical attack is 2 seconds pop the front and then, run something connected to it, that's probably going to be the way that the spies would actually attack it, as opposed to waiting for you to unlock it, capturing that, and replaying it back later. Like,
no, I don't think they have to wait for you. So it says that the Bluetooth Low Energy ID is broadcast by the lock. My assumption is that's always being broadcast by the lock, not necessarily when the person goes to unlock it. Although I didn't.
Well, it makes me wonder: can you set this key to be your own key, and it broadcasts whatever it is, or is it built into the device?
Yeah,
and, it's supposed to be transparent to the user.
The way I understood it, yeah, the low energy ID is probably similar to like a MAC address would be on an Ethernet adapter.
Yeah, which makes me wonder if it's unique per device.
Yeah,
frankly,
most likely, but.
Nah, my guess is it's probably universal. Or it's in batches, right?
It could be in batches, yes.
Yeah.
But I think of that more as a MAC address. Anyway, Jeff, you wanted to jump to a different story.
Yeah, I was interested in talking a little bit about Android phones. You had an article there about which phones regularly get security updates. And my question to our esteemed panel here, and I don't know how much either of you guys deal with Android phones. So I'm currently working on a project that involves Android phones and, wait for it, PCI.
Oh God! Please stop.
Well, one of the PCI requirements for systems is that you have some sort of hardening standard or build standard or configuration standard that you secure the device. And I've been looking for something like that for Android, and I haven't been able to find one. So it's really an appeal to our listening audience. If anybody knows of any kind of hardening standard, configuration guidelines, I've obviously Googled this and found the typical ways that you protect your phone as a consumer, but the use case here is more like there's the desire is to have very, very limited functionality on this mobile device other than an application that's being loaded on, and it's intended for even the user of the device to only have access to that one application and nothing else. And it turns out there's tons of ways to gain access.
Yeah.
To features. They're features. Most of them are features.
They are like the debugger.
The 55555
the debugging tools,
port.
The developer tools, and so on and so forth. So, I don't know what you want to say about the article itself.
Yeah, I don't know of anything, Jeff, off the top of my head. I know that there are some basic things you can do in Android to help secure it. I do also believe that very specific use cases like that rank security really high, or even if you're going to put, like, let's say you're a financial institution and you develop an app for Android and you're going to release that in the marketplace, a lot of third-party security solutions vendors exist to help you apply security to your app so you can be more secure. I would say that the specific use case, I would highly recommend that in addition to all the things you can do in Android, which in my opinion are pretty limited to lock it down security-wise, that you're going to want some third-party technology to run on top of that to ensure that you're basically swimming in shark-infested waters, and you need some other kind of protection other than the amount of water in between you and the shark.
Well, it's funny. I think there was I can almost confirm it. I'm like 99% sure here. There was a tweet by Space Rogue 2 years ago, 3 years ago, where he said, look, there are two kinds of people when it comes to mobile devices. Those that can afford iPhones and those that can't. And that's effectively like the security model is, if you can afford an iPhone, you're probably okay. Everybody else, you're in shark-infested waters. Like, you might as
I don't
well.
know. I would argue that the iPhone is still in shark-infested waters, although the major improvement we heard about this week was the USB protections, data mode protections that they have for iPhones. But yeah. And certainly I think that where Space Rogue kind of missed the very small subset of the population where I put myself, was you have an Android phone, but you buy the one from Google, and you get all of the updates, and you actually apply them, first of all. That's a much smaller use case, though. Not everyone likes to, go out and buy the phone outright and keep up to date. It's mostly a nerd activity, so I don't think it comes up on the radar if you think about how many, outside of that crowd, how many Android and iPhone devices exist in the world and are in use today. So
6 billion, 5 billion,
yeah,
a lot.
something like that. A lot.
Well, and I was looking at, just trying to figure out, just how many vulnerabilities are there. And I found some website that charted how many vulnerabilities have been reported on Android over the last 10 or 15 years. And then I also was looking up, it might have been the CVE website, some offshoot of that. But I was also looking up iPhone. And the first thing I looked at, there was like one vulnerability reported in like the life of iPhone. I'm like, whoa, that's amazing. But then I kept digging, and then I went and found I want to say it was iPhone OS or something like that. And then it looked a lot more like the Android, where there's been lots of vulnerabilities reported over the years.
So I think
it all depends on what
here, though.
What's that?
The metric is the cost of the vulnerability per type of phone. You go to find a remote root execution or remote root vulnerability in an iPhone, it's over $1 million to go and buy or sell one of those to a gray market vendor. You find that on an Android, it's $200K, maybe, if you're lucky, maybe $25K.
Yeah. So we may not know, and the whole thing is you may not know if there are serious vulnerabilities in the iOS platform because they might not report those to Apple.
True. Which begs the question, and I should know the answer to this, but are there bug bounties for Androids and for iPhones?
So
this is the bug bounty show, so I'm glad you asked that question, Jeff.
It's kind of the theme.
It is.
There are for iOS. Now it's somewhat limited. I believe it's a private invitation by Apple, and the requirements out of that are actually pretty strong in terms of they want basically remote vulnerabilities against the iPhone itself. There are kind of different scales of payment based on the kind of vulnerabilities you find. For Android, I believe there is. I don't know 100%. I think that Google has something for its Pixel, but I don't know that it has something for all of the different iterations of Android that exist for the different companies. So that, unfortunately, I don't have an answer to.
Well, and I mean, Android is also naturally a much larger attack surface because it's used on a number of different devices. Because Android is a much more open platform. iOS only runs on Apple-made devices.
That's true.
Android runs on. I mean, I've got there's a million options for Android TVs, devices. They all run Android. I bought a music player this week that runs Android, and it's their own version of Android. So I think naturally there's going to be a lot more vulnerabilities. It may be Android, but it may be a manufacturer-specific implementation of it.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. And if any of our listeners have any, insights or ideas of how to lock down, from a programmatic perspective in Android, let us know.
A librarian has sued Equifax over the 2017 breach, and she won $600. Now, she did state that the small claims case was a lot more about raising awareness than it was actually getting some type of payout.
That's probably more than they would have got if they had joined a class action lawsuit anyway. So
true,
good for them.
True, and it wasn't so much about the mishandling of data as much as it was the time that was ensued as her parents, I believe, passed away and were part of the breach, and that was part of the legal case. But again, I believe they put that case together essentially to raise awareness. Hence us talking about it on the show.
Well,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead, Keith.
So here's the thing, right? If all, I don't know, what was it, 180 million, 200 million people were to go and, go to small claims court, point to this case for $600 against Equifax, and then all of them independently bring suits, imagine how much that would cost Equifax if they did that. Right? And quite frankly, I think that people should. And I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a financial advisor, and I don't pretend to be one on TV or this podcast. And I'm not a lawyer, right? Like that's the biggest thing. But that's a much bigger sum of money than otherwise.
Right. So,
go ahead,
and
Jeff.
that's sort of related to what I was going to say, just in terms of, this was a civil suit, which is you're trying to get money for some wrong that was done to you. And what's very typical, because reading through the article, I think she was asking for $5,000. I think that was the right number.
Yes.
And she was awarded $600, which is very much the tradition and the precedent that's in civil suits is you sue for some sort of amount and you get some percentage of that amount. That's very common, and very often it's an out-of-court settlement, and very often it's if it's like a personal injury case, it's being handled by your insurance company.
Right.
So, I wouldn't get hung up on the numbers, whether they were large or small or insignificant. As Keith said, multiply that by all the victims, then it's substantial. And to raise the awareness, which is the claim of why she did this, hopefully that's a deterrent if that's a legitimate way for companies to go out and do security better. This too could cost you $600 or $600 times however million customers you have.
I want to ask you both, did you, in the news this week, journalists were in Singapore, covering all the happenings that were happening between the U.S. and North Korea. Now, the journalists, the interesting thing was the journalists in Singapore, hopefully I got all of that correct, were handed these journalist kits. Apparently, it was like, I think the thing I read earlier this week was it was 33 degrees Celsius or 94 point something degrees Fahrenheit. So it was really hot. Yep. So they got, a bunch of stuff, a water bottle and some other stuff. But also they included in this kit for journalists, which I believe was provided by North Korea, was, or maybe it was Singapore, I'm not sure. But they got these USB fans. I don't know if you guys have seen these. Yep. It's been a tchotchke giveaway at a lot of conferences, right? It's got a USB connector.
I used to have one. They're great.
Yeah, you plug it into your phone, which I think is bad. More likely, I plug mine into my battery packs, right? Oh. You plug it in there, and then you get a little fan. And there was tons of news articles saying how there could be, some news articles called it spyware, which is pretty funny, but there could have been some kind of malicious payload on these USB devices. Now, what I want to ask our audience is, did anyone get a hold of one of these? Has anyone done the analysis on it? Was it actually malicious, or was this just everyone making the assumption that journalists would be victims of this attack? And largely the advice was not to plug this in, but I have not seen any evidence that there was anything malicious on here. And if any journalist listening or any security researcher listening, if you want to get together, you want to donate one of these to the security community, I think there's a lot of people that would sign up to happily take a look and tell you if there's anything malicious on there, and hopefully report back to the community, because I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so honestly, I have
a bug bounty of $600.
There you go. Right?
There you go.
I have not seen anyone actually report vulnerabilities or exploits or anything related to these, whether they're Wi-Fi enabled or otherwise, on these specific fans. But Paul, to your earlier comments about research, what they really need here is a USB condom, which only allows power to be passed to devices, and not data.
Do you have one of those?
I do.
Which only works.
It's branded, if that's okay.
It's branded with Bug Crowd, of course.
It is, actually.
Which,
so
like so many other condoms, it only works if you use it.
Yeah.
Right. So the interesting thing about USB condoms, though, is what it does is there's two kinds, right? There are kinds that
are ribbed and not ribbed.
Sure.
Flavored, colored.
But by ribbed, we mean the kind that basically have a resistor on the other end of the data pins, which causes kind of like a negative pushback of the electricity, versus like having a dead pin, meaning like the pin doesn't actually exist or connect. the difference here is a dead pin will still try to transmit data, and the electricity will just kind of fade off of that dead pin. So you still, for every 2 steps forward or 5 steps forward, you're 1 step back, right? You're losing a little bit from the data attempting to push, whereas the resistor actually causes kind of a negative pushback of that energy. So you actually save electricity with the resistor being in place on those pins.
Now, big question, Keith. Which type is your Bugcrowd branded USB condom?
It is the resistor type. Oh. So we're all about security, and in this case, also saving you some energy.
Okay. Oh, cool story of the week is where I want to go next. I thought this story was absolutely fascinating. There was an Air Force officer who was missing for 35 years. Apparently, in December of 1983, Howard Hughes Jr. was officially listed as a deserter, right? Classified as
William Howard Hughes Jr.
Oh, sorry, did I say that wrong? Yes, thank you, Jeff. William Howard Hughes Jr. Officially classified as a deserted from the U.S. Air Force, and was not heard from until recently, where what I'm told, and I had to use multiple articles to pull together. They all had kind of different pieces of the puzzle, and certainly the puzzle is not complete. So let's see. He was known to his neighbors as Tim. However, he went by another name, Barry O'Byrne, and this was discovered. So the next logical question was, how does this guy get caught after 35 years of deserting from the U.S. Air Force? Apparently, it was a passport fraud investigation. Now, I'm not sure which U.S. government office or military guy, I guess in this case, would be a government office that would be investigating passport fraud, or the other question is, were they looking for just passport fraud and uncovered this person who had deserted the U.S. Air Force, or is there another group within the U.S. government that's looking for people who have deserted and went to passport fraud to maybe determine that? I'm not sure the order. But eventually, so after the passport fraud investigation, and I'm not sure which office conducted that, it said the U.S. Department of State's Diplomatic Security Service interviewed an individual claiming to be Barry O'Byrne. After confronted with inconsistencies about his identity, the individual admitted his true name was William Howard Hughes Jr., and then they knew that they had the person. I'm not sure if they were looking for this person, or in the passport fraud, it kind of led them into finding this person. Now, during the Cold War, Hughes was involved in classified planning and analysis of NATO's control, command, and communication surveillance systems during the Cold War, and he specialized in radar surveillance. And so the speculation is, was this person feeding information to Russia at the time? Did this person flip, or did he just get frustrated and leave? We really don't know. I think it's kind of fascinating about how you would find someone like this, if you were looking for that person, people who have deserted the military for over 30 years. Is there a team of people looking for these people, or are they just found through other means? I don't know. I thought that was kind of, if anyone knows how that works, it'd be pretty. I think it's pretty neat.
The question that I have is, how do they even? I mean, the records, right? So 30 years ago, in terms of the records and the databases or the mainframes that this must have existed in, that they
Careful
still
what
have
you say
this
here,
somewhere. So treading lightly, the systems that these would have been programmed in, that they could be so readily searchable by modern day technology to be flagged and then ultimately identified in what seemed to be a very fast or rapid manner, is interesting to me. So it tells me either that they've taken the data and they've migrated it to a service that can then be searched faster, which wouldn't surprise me. I mean,
or they didn't search at all. William Hughes just said, "Hey, I'm William Hughes," and they're like, "Oh, interesting." They didn't have to go search for that in a database. They just knew. Oh, you told them basically I was the one that deserted 35 years ago.
Right. So maybe they have a list of deserters that they're actually looking for actively.
And then I think of the guy at the end of the Raiders of the Lost Ark that goes into the room and goes into the 1983 U.S. Air Force deserted file it's in like a row somewhere, and pulled out, his paper file, and I'm like, oh yeah, that is you.
Yeah. So Keith, to answer your larger question, old data throughout time that has been cataloged in hard copy or in the early days of other forms of magnetic storage, people like to update that to modern media because of the automated search capability. Whether it's a good idea or not, people would much rather have an automated way of searching using a database, or using, these days it's Googling, that type of thing. So whether it ever should have been done or not, you can rest assured that all the data from the past is somewhere out on the internet these days. To the larger question of how they found the guy, I would suspect it was just a cascade of little things here and there. I doubt if they were actively looking for him.
Right.
I'm curious as to what they're doing with him. They've detained him, obviously, or apparently. Are they going to try to push him for court-martial? My guess is they want to interview him and try to get to the bottom of why he deserted, and did he compromise any secrets, which he'll naturally volunteer, and that'll settle things, and he'll go back to his life.
I don't know about that, Jeff. And I'm not sure how that process works. If he's, it depends on what he's going to be tried with, right? I'm assuming there's some kind of military tribunal. Is that the right term for that?
I think so.
He was Air Force. Yeah. I mean, he'll get court-martialed for desertion, in theory. And
is there a statute of limitations on court-martialing for desertion?
I was thinking the same thing. I don't believe that there is, which is why they were detaining him in the first place. So there's probably just whatever the punishment is for desertion, which, back in the Revolutionary War, you would just get shot, probably true in the Civil War. It wasn't active warfare in '83, I don't think. When was Grenada?
Korean War. Grenada? Korean War was technically still active, or not active, but still in existence.
No.
Well, it depends on also what they try him with too. If they deem him to be an enemy of the state, his fate could be much different than if he's just looked at as a deserter.
There's a big difference between desertion and he would be charged with treason.
And pretty amazing how he was able to hide for 35 years under assumed identities as well.
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting.
That is a cool story for this week, Paul.
Yes, I like I said, I don't know if I can come up with a cool story every week, but I thought that was a cool story that was even somewhat related to information security and hacking. Certainly, the next story under ridiculous stories is not. It really makes me question if physics work differently in Pennsylvania, as a Pennsylvania driver allegedly defecates on another man in a road rage incident. A man on Friday allegedly defecated on a fellow driver after the two engaged in a road rage argument. I'm not sure how. I don't really want to think about how that might work. The way that
by the way, it was a woman that defecated.
It was a woman. Okay. Now, what was interesting,
that explains it.
They referenced, like, if you're into this story, you might be into a story where I believe it was in Canada, where a woman defecated in a Tim Hortons and then threw the stuff at the people that work there.
She flung poo? Is that what you need to tell me?
She flung poo, yes.
Interesting.
Anyway, yeah, because they didn't let her use the bathroom. That was why she was flinging poo.
Oh, jeez.
Anyway.
Wow.
Anyway, moving on.
Maybe she was seeing if it stuck. So researchers studied 160 million memes and found most of them come from two websites. One of them being a subreddit, which is like r_Donald or something like that, and another one coming from a political channel. I guess you call it on 4chan/POL. And after a very extensive study, we have this really useful information now that most memes originate from those two particular sites. In case you're
do they really originate, or are they being harvested and collected in two major repositories?
Not sure. It'd be interesting to uncover who is creating all of the memes. Maybe there are a group of individuals that are responsible for posting it on these two sites. Who knows? So
it seems that there's a gravitational force of these two sites to aggregate memes together to take over the world with memes. I don't know. Maybe it's Russia and China, and they're getting together on a meme war.
Maybe.
World War III
do they
memes.
split all the cat memes equally across the two sites?
That's right. That's right.
Indeed.
Cat memes are important to the health of the internet. Anyway, I don't really have any other interesting stories for you, unless you guys have anything.
Nope. I'm good.
Nope, I'm good.
I mean, we covered the gamut.
We absolutely did. We went through them all. We caught them all.
We
Pokemon.
did. Well, thank you everyone for listening and watching this edition of Paul's Security Weekly. We will see everyone next time. Over and out.